I still remember the first time I saw him. It was raining outside. I was standing in the corner of a social worker's office, clutching a stuffed bunny I didn't even like. Everything smelled like old coffee and bleach. That's when a tall teenage boy walked in, looked at me, knelt down, and said gently, "From now on, you've got me." That was Ethan, my foster brother. I had just lost my parents in a car crash. I was 6, scared, alone. And then, out of nowhere, I was placed into a stranger's house, with a new family I didn't understand. And a boy who kept calling me his little sister like he meant it more than anyone ever had. I grew up with him. Ethan became my protector, my anchor. When I was bullied in school, he stormed into the principal's office without hesitation. When I broke down over my first heartbreak, he didn't say anything, he just held out a cup of hot cocoa and sat beside me until I stopped crying. And when I got my acceptance letter to college, he was prouder than anyone else, cheering louder than my foster parents. Ethan wasn't just a brother. He was everything. But I never questioned it. Not once. I never wondered why his gaze lingered just a second too long when I smiled. Or why he'd go quiet every time I mentioned a guy I liked. Or why he always said, "Don't fall for anyone who won't protect you the way I do." It wasn't until last summer that the truth cracked open like a secret hidden in plain sight. I was looking for a copy of my birth certificate in Dad's filing cabinet when I found a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front. Inside, adoption papers. My heart dropped. Not a single drop of blood in that house matched mine. Ethan wasn't my brother. He never had been. And that night, when I looked into his eyes over dinner, I finally saw it. That wasn't the look of a brother protecting his sister. That was a man who had been in love all along. I didn't say anything that night. I couldn't. Ethan sat across the table, casually spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate like he always did, asking if I needed more salad, joking about the cat next door that kept stealing our laundry. Everything was so normal, but inside me, nothing felt normal anymore. Every word he said echoed louder than it should have. Every glance felt sharper. I excused myself early, claiming I had a headache. And when I got to my room, I locked the door behind me and slid to the floor, clutching those papers like they were radioactive. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. How could I not have known? How could I have missed it? The signs were there, weren't they? The way he never dated anyone seriously. The way he always looked uncomfortable when I got too close to other guys. The way he'd memorize the smallest things about me, how I like my coffee, how I tap my foot when I'm nervous, how I hate sleeping with the door closed. He didn't look at me like a brother should. And now, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of his footsteps moving around in the hallway. I kept replaying every moment between us in my head, every hug, every smile, every time he'd reached out to fix a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Suddenly, it all felt too close, too intimate, too real. The next morning, I avoided him. I skipped breakfast, left for campus early, ignored his texts. I couldn't face him, not with the storm brewing in my chest. I didn't even know what I felt. Fear, guilt, confusion, or something far worse. The thought terrified me, because deep down, there was a part of me that had always felt safe with him. Special, cherished in a way that no one else had ever made me feel. And maybe, just maybe, some part of me had clung to that feeling a little too tightly. That night, I came home late, hoping he'd be asleep. But he wasn't. He was sitting on the couch, the adoption papers on the table in front of him. He didn't look surprised. "I guess you found out," he said, voice low. I froze. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he continued, eyes locked on mine. "But maybe it's time you knew." My throat tightened. "How long?" He gave a bitter smile. "Since the day you walked in holding that bunny. I knew you weren't mine. But I also knew you were going to be the most important person in my life." He stood up slowly, walked toward me, then stopped just inches away. His voice trembled now. I tried. Ellie. I tried so hard to be just your brother. But I couldn't. Not when you smiled like that. Not when you cried and I was the only one who could make it stop. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't. Don't, I whispered. Heart pounding. Don't say it. But it was too late. He had already said everything I wasn't ready to hear. And the worst part? My heart wasn't pushing him away. It was reaching for him. I ran. I didn't even know where my feet were taking me, just that I needed space. Distance. Air. Something to stop the whirlwind of emotions crashing inside me like a violent tide. How could he say those things? How could I let him? I ended up at the old library 2 blocks from campus. It was nearly empty at that hour. I curled up in a dusty armchair in the farthest corner, pulled my knees to my chest, and tried to breathe. My thoughts were tangled beyond repair. Ethan had always been the one constant in my life. The protector. The safe space. The one person who made me feel like I mattered. And now, I didn't know what he was anymore. I kept replaying the way his voice broke. The way he looked at me, not with regret. Not with shame. But with something raw. Unfiltered. Like he'd been carrying this secret for years and finally let it slip. A part of me wanted to scream at him. Another part wanted to fall into his arms and forget the world. That terrified me most of all. Was this what it felt like to cross a line you could never uncross? I stayed there for hours, drifting in and out of thought, until my phone buzzed. Ethan, please come home. You don't have to talk to me. Just let me know you're okay. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I typed a reply. Erased it. Typed again. Deleted it again. In the end, I sent nothing. But I went home. It was almost midnight when I slipped through the front door. The lights were off except for the hallway lamp. He always left it on when I was out late. Just like Dad used to. I tiptoed upstairs, careful not to make a sound. But his door creaked open the second I passed it. Ellie? His voice was soft, vulnerable. I turned to face him in the dim light. His hair was a mess. His eyes were red. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't say anything. He stepped out into the hallway, standing just a few feet from me. We were both barefoot, both quiet, like we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't name. I'm sorry, he said, for everything. I should have kept it buried. I finally spoke. You didn't lie to me, Ethan. But you didn't tell me either. I thought if I kept pretending, I could keep you as my sister, as someone I could protect. That maybe, if I never said it out loud, it wouldn't be real. A long silence stretched between us. Then he whispered, "Do you hate me now?" That question sliced right through me. I should have said yes. I should have screamed at him, told him he ruined everything. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered back, "I don't know how to feel." And that was the truth. Because the more I tried to untangle the mess inside me, the more I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to lose him. Not as my brother. Not even as something else. I just didn't want to lose him at all. The days that followed were like walking on glass. We danced around each other, careful, quiet, pretending everything was fine when it absolutely wasn't. I'd come downstairs for breakfast to find Ethan already gone. A plate left out for me with a sticky note, "Coffee's hot. Don't be late to class." He never said anything more. He never pushed. But I could feel it, every time we crossed paths. Every time our eyes met and darted away just as quickly. Like we were afraid of what might happen if we actually held the stare. I started noticing things I used to overlook. How he never brought anyone home. How he kept my childhood art projects in a small box in his closet. How every birthday gift he gave me over the years had been exactly what I wanted, things I never told anyone but had written in my journal. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or horrified. Then came the night of the alumni dinner. I hadn't planned on going, but my friend Marissa practically dragged me out of the house. "You need to stop moping," she said. "You've been weird lately." "Is it a guy?" I laughed it off. If only she knew. I wore a black dress, simple. Nothing special, but when Ethan saw me at the top of the stairs, his breath caught. I saw it. just for a second. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. "Wow," he murmured. Barely audible. I should have brushed past him. I should have kept walking. Instead, I asked, "Do I look okay?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Too good." Those words echoed in my chest all night. At the dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I tried to distract myself, chatted with friends, danced with an old classmate, but it was all static in my head. I checked my phone more than once, hoping for some random message from him. Nothing. When I got home, the house was dark, quiet. I headed to the kitchen for a glass of water, and that's when I heard the piano. It was soft, faint, coming from the room we barely used anymore. "Ethan." I pushed the door open gently. There he was, sitting on the bench in the moonlight, fingers moving across the keys like he was playing from memory, not reading sheet music. The melody was sad, beautiful, but aching. He didn't stop when I walked in. "I thought you quit piano," I said softly. "I only play when I can't sleep." "What's keeping you up?" He paused, then whispered, "You." I froze. He finally turned, and our eyes met in the silence. "I lied when I said I buried it," he continued. "I didn't. I can't. I've tried every day for years, Ellie. But it's like breathing now. I don't know how to stop." I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come, because he wasn't just confessing anymore. He was breaking. And all I wanted in that moment was to reach for him and hold him together. I didn't think. I crossed the room and sat beside him on the piano bench, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his skin. The keys fell silent under his hands, but the air between us hummed with something louder than music. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there, two people who used to know exactly what we were to each other, now teetering on the edge of something we couldn't name. He was the first to break the silence. "I used to play that song the night you moved in," Ethan said quietly. "You were asleep upstairs. I couldn't sleep. I was scared, I guess. Scared of messing up. Scared you'd hate it here." I turned to him, searching his face. "Why would I have hated it?" "Because I didn't know how to be a brother," he whispered. "But I knew. I wanted to be everything you needed." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I looked at his hands, those hands that used to tie my shoelaces when I was too little to do it myself, that pulled me out of puddles, carried me home from school when I twisted my ankle, handed me tissues when I cried over silly things. I had spent so long thinking of those hands as safe, but now I couldn't stop wondering what it would feel like to hold them in mine. Not as a sister, not as a child, but as something else entirely. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling, "what are we doing?" He turned to me slowly. "I don't know," he admitted. "All I know is, I've never wanted to cross a line so badly. And I've never been so afraid to do it." We stared at each other. So close. Too close. I could see every flicker of doubt in his eyes, every war raging inside him. But beneath all of that, there was something else. Something fierce, desperate, honest. And without even thinking about it, I leaned forward. Just a breath, just a heartbeat. Then he whispered, "Ellie, if I kiss you right now, there's no going back." My breath hitched. "Maybe we were never supposed to go back," I said. He didn't wait another second. His lips met mine, and in that moment, the world vanished. There was no past, no titles, no guilt. Only warmth. Only truth. Only the way we fit together like we always had, just finally without the lies we used to hide behind. When we pulled apart, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. The line had been crossed, and we both knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains like nothing had changed. But everything had. I woke up in my own bed, alone. But the memory of last night clung to my skin like fire. The kiss. The way his hands hesitated at my waist before pulling me closer. The way we didn't need to say anything, because the silence had said it all. I stayed under the covers for a long time, unsure what to do, unsure what to say. Because while the moment had felt right, The world outside that moment still existed. And it was loud, complicated, judgmental. We weren't siblings by blood, but we had been raised as such. If anyone found out, what would they think? What would they say? Would it matter? I dragged myself out of bed, heart pounding. The hallway was quiet. The door to Ethan's room was shut. My stomach twisted. Was he regretting it? I tiptoed downstairs, expecting him to be gone, but there he was, sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, staring at nothing. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. Morning. His voice was careful, neutral. I hated it. Hey, I said, clutching the hem of my sweatshirt like it could protect me from whatever came next. He poured me a cup of coffee like always. But this time, his hands were shaking. We sat in silence. Then finally, he spoke. Last night, I didn't plan it. I didn't mean to take advantage of the moment. You didn't, I said quickly. He looked up, searching my face. Then why do you look like you want to run? Because I'm scared, I admitted. Not of you. Of what this means. Of what it could cost us. He nodded. Slowly. I get it. I've been scared for years. Ellie. He pushed his coffee aside and leaned forward. Voice lower now, firmer. But last night wasn't a mistake. I've lived in this house for so long pretending I was okay with just being your brother. I'm not. My heart hammered so hard I could barely breathe. Then what are we now? I asked. He smiled. But it was sad. Something we can't explain to anyone. I laughed softly, bitterly. What are we supposed to say? We grew up together. But don't worry. We're not related. His expression darkened. People won't understand, he said. They'll judge. They'll say it's wrong. But it's not, I whispered. And even I was surprised by the certainty in my voice. We didn't choose this life. We just found something real in it. He stood up then, walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. I don't care what they say, he murmured. All I care about is not losing you. I stood too, walked up behind him. My hand brushed his. He didn't move. I don't want to lose you either, I said. He turned, his eyes full of all the things he couldn't say out loud. Things we both felt but hadn't dared name. But we can't keep this a secret forever. Ethan, I know. And we can't stay frozen here, pretending the world won't notice. He reached up, touched my cheek gently. Then maybe we don't pretend. A shiver ran through me. Because that was the scariest idea of all. To be honest. To be seen. To be in love. And not apologize for it. Secrets don't stay buried forever. We knew that. Maybe we were foolish to think we had time to figure it out. Time to be just us for a little while longer. But life doesn't wait. Especially not when you're carrying something as fragile as the truth. It started with a knock at the door. I had just come home from class. Ethan was in the garage, fixing something with his usual obsessive focus. I opened the door without thinking. It was Claire. Claire, the childhood friend who used to come over every summer. Who'd seen Ethan carry me on his back through sprinklers and patch my scraped knees. She hadn't changed much. Same too bright smile. Same eyes that saw more than they let on. Ellie? She said, blinking in surprise. Wow. You look different. I forced a smile. Claire. Hey. It's been a while. Ethan home? Yeah. He's out back. She tilted her head, gaze flickering past me into the house. You two still living together? Huh? She said casually. Even now that you're, what, 20? 21, right. Her smile tightened. Grown up. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. She stayed for dinner. I watched every move she made. The way she observed us too closely. The questions she asked, harmless on the surface, but laced with something sharper. How long's it been since you started dating anyone? Ethan? She asked halfway through dessert. He glanced at me, just for a second. A while. You've always been protective of Ellie, she said with a knowing smirk. Remember that one time you punched Kyle for calling her a nerd in middle school? He laughed. But it didn't reach his eyes. Claire kept going. And now she's... what? All grown up. Beautiful. Still single. Living under the same roof. It's almost... romantic. The silence that followed was thick. Too thick. My spoon clinked against the bowl. Ethan cleared his throat. I think it's time you left. Claire. Her smile dropped. She looked at me, long. Searching. Does she know? She asked softly. I froze. Ethan stood slowly. Claire, you were obsessed with her even when we were kids, she said. Rising to her feet. I used to think it was sweet. But this? Her eyes narrowed. This is something else. She turned to me. Ellie. Whatever he's told you, just be careful. Love can feel real when it's all you've ever known. She walked out before either of us could speak. The door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, the illusion we'd been living in, our bubble of silence and stolen moments, shattered. I turned to Ethan. His jaw was clenched. His hands were fists at his sides. She won't say anything, he said quietly. She's angry. But she won't ruin this for us. But I wasn't so sure, because Claire had always been good at getting what she wanted. And now she knew the one thing that could ruin us. I sat down on the couch. Heart pounding in my ears. What if she tells people? Ethan looked at me. His expression torn between fear and defiance. Then let them talk. But we're not ready for this, I whispered. Not yet. He knelt in front of me. Took my hands. Ellie. We survived everything life threw at us. This we faced together. And even as fear curled inside me, so did something else. A fierce, burning belief that no matter what came next, he wouldn't let me face it alone. The fallout came faster than we expected. 3 days after Claire walked out, Ethan got a call from Dad. Not the man who adopted me, but his father. Our foster grandfather. Retired Army. Old-fashioned. The kind of man who ironed his socks and believed family was carved in stone. Unchanging and sacred. I heard Ethan's voice tighten over the phone. No, sir. It's not like that, he said. Then quieter. Yes. I understand. We'll come by. He hung up and sat there, staring at nothing. What did he say? I asked. My heart crawling up into my throat. He wants to see us, Ethan said. Together. I didn't need him to explain. Claire had talked. We drove in silence to the family house. A place that had once been a haven, birthday balloons, Christmas dinners, backyard barbecues. Now, it felt like we were walking into a courtroom. Grandpa was waiting on the porch. Arms folded. He didn't say a word as we parked. Just nodded toward the door. We followed him inside. The living room was too quiet. No TV. No ticking clock. Just the hum of judgment filling the space. He gestured for us to sit. Then he looked straight at Ethan. You want to tell me what the hell's going on? Ethan didn't flinch. Nothing illegal. Nothing wrong. Not wrong? Grandpa's voice rose. You were raised as siblings. You think this is some kind of soap opera? We're not related, Ethan said calmly. You and Dad took her in. She became part of our lives. Yes. But we're not blood. And we're not kids anymore. I sat there frozen. Unable to speak. My heart felt like it might burst through my chest. Grandpa turned to me then. His expression softened, but not with kindness. With pity. Ellie. I know you've been through a lot. I know you trusted this family. But you need to think. Really think. This kind of thing, it'll follow you. I found my voice. Though it cracked. I have thought. For a long time. And I know this isn't easy to understand. But it's not some fantasy. It's real. His jaw clenched. You're ruining everything your parents gave you. The life they wanted for you. Is that what you want? Ethan stood then. Slow and controlled. I'm not ashamed of how I feel, he said. And I won't let anyone make her feel ashamed either. Grandpa's eyes darkened. Then you're not welcome under this roof. It hit like a slap. Not because of the words, but because they came from someone who once told me I'd always have a place here. Ethan reached for my hand. I took it. We turned and left, our hearts heavy. Our future unclear. But our decision made. Outside. The wind was colder. Sharper. I leaned into Ethan. My voice barely a whisper. Did we just lose our family? He squeezed my hand tighter. Maybe. But we didn't lose each other. And in that moment, as we stood in the driveway of the house that no longer felt like home, I realized something. Love isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose to stay when everyone else turns away. The whispers came slowly at first, like distant thunder. It started with subtle changes. Friends replying slower to texts. A professor who used to smile now giving me curt nods. Marissa, my best friend since freshman year, suddenly too busy to grab coffee. And then the messages began. Anonymous DMs. Half laughing. Half cruel. So, you're dating your brother now? Sweet Home Alabama much? You should have just kept it in the dark. I didn't respond. I didn't delete them either. I read every word like punishment. Each one another reminder of the world we'd stepped into. Ethan tried to shield me from it. He told me to stay off social media. He left little notes around the house to make me smile, childish doodles, dumb puns, stupid memes on post-its. But I could see it wearing on him. He barely slept. He flinched every time my phone buzzed. And some nights, I'd catch him staring at the wall like he was somewhere else entirely. Maybe we should leave, I said one night as we sat on the roof of our apartment building, watching city lights flicker like dying stars. Leave? He echoed. Move. Start over. Somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere we don't have to explain. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I've thought about it too. I looked at him. Really looked. He was tired. But he was also proud, fierce, unwilling to hide. But we shouldn't have to run, he said. We didn't do anything wrong. I leaned my head against his shoulder. But maybe the world doesn't care about right or wrong. Just what looks wrong. He wrapped his arm around me. Then let them look. The next day, I told Marissa. I called her. Asked her to meet me in person. She came. But she was different, her usual easy warmth replaced with something guarded. I told her everything. The adoption. The truth. The kiss. The love. She sat there. Expression unreadable. When I finished, she exhaled. You know people are going to keep judging you. Right? Probably forever. I know. And you're okay with that? No, I said. But I'm more okay with being judged than pretending I don't love him. She stared at me for a long beat. Then, to my surprise, she nodded. Well, she said slowly, at least you're honest. That's more than I can say for most people. We didn't hug. We didn't laugh like old times. But as she stood to leave, she said, I don't get it, Ellie. But I don't hate you for it. It wasn't acceptance. But it wasn't abandonment either. And for now, that was enough. It wasn't a clean journey. There were still stairs on the street. Still conversations that stopped when we entered a room. Still moments when doubt crept in like a shadow, quiet, patient, waiting to be fed. But we didn't feed it. Instead, we built something. Ethan got a job at a design firm across town, small, independent, but full of people who judged him for his work, not his past. I switched my major to psychology. I wanted to understand people better, maybe even understand myself better. We moved into a small apartment with peeling paint and too much sunlight. The kind of place you fall in love with not because it's perfect, but because it holds your worst days and still feels like home. And for the first time in a long time, we started living. Not hiding, not explaining, just living. Some nights, we'd sit on the floor, backs against the wall, take out containers between us, and laugh over stupid things like how I still couldn't cook rice properly or how Ethan still mistook baking powder for flour. We made new friends. Friends who didn't know our story, and didn't ask. They just saw two people who looked at each other like the world stopped spinning. And that was enough. But the past has a way of showing up, especially when you think it's done with you. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the letter. Handwritten. Neat. Formal. From my biological mother. I hadn't heard from her since I was 6, since the accident that took everything away and brought Ethan into my life. I stared at the return address for a long time before opening it. She'd heard about us. From someone. Maybe Claire. Maybe the internet. She said she didn't understand. That she never would. But at the bottom of the page, she'd written something that stopped me cold. You were always someone who walked into the fire if it meant finding the truth. That was your father's spirit in you. He'd be proud, not because of who you love, but because you chose love at all. I cried for an hour after that, not because it made everything okay, but because it reminded me that sometimes love isn't loud. It's quiet. A line at the end of a letter. A door left unlocked. A space that once held pain, now making room for peace. That night, I sat beside Ethan on our too small couch, rested my head on his shoulder, and whispered, "I think I'm done being afraid." He smiled against my hair. "Good. Because I've been waiting for you to say that." I pulled back and looked at him, really looked. Everything we'd lost, everything we'd risked, everything we'd fought for, was written in the way he looked at me. Not like a brother, not like a savior, but like someone who had loved me in every version I'd ever been. "I want to tell the world," I said. He raised a brow. "You sure?" I nodded. "Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them know." So we did. We posted a photo, just us, standing outside our building. No caption. No explanation. Just our hands intertwined. And something strange happened. Some people unfollowed, but some people reached out. Quietly, anonymously. They said, "Thank you." I thought I was alone. You made me feel less ashamed. I realized then, we weren't just surviving. We were giving permission for others to love faithfully, to live honestly, to rewrite their stories without offense. And maybe that's all we were ever meant to be. Not brother and sister, not mistake and shame, but proof that sometimes, just sometimes, love chooses us in the most unexpected places. And if we're brave enough to stay, it becomes the only truth worth holding on to. The end.